Welcome back to the Hold Fast podcast, where we have biblical truths for daily battles. My name is Kenny. I'm the host of the podcast. I don't know about you, but there's so many times in my life when just life is busy, life is chaotic, and I have these things that I kind of naturally retreat to. So my home, for example, being able to just kind of go home and relax. Maybe once we put Lily to bed, just kind of get in bed and watch TV, or have a nice big bowl of ice cream or a donut or something. Like, I have these things that just kind of allow me to decompress and relax and all these things. And that's something that, spiritually speaking, I do not do enough of. And that's what I want to talk about today. Where do you turn to when your soul is needing rest, when your soul is in turmoil? What do you do when life is just crazy and you've got all this noise going on in your head and in our world, and you feel kind of pulled back and forth with the latest controversy of the day, or you just are tired of the division around you and you're just wondering what to do about it all, how to think about it all? Maybe in the midst of that, you've had something happen in your life that you're grieving, maybe a death in the family, or maybe a diagnosis, or maybe just loss of a job, or something that's happened that's just kind of rocked your boat. And so you try to find some spiritual help and spiritual guidance. But if I'm honest, there's times when I kind of go look for that, and I'll try to search podcasts or sermons, and it feels like everybody's just talking about current cultural issues, and there's just a lot of noise. And what I want to do is to find a place of rest for my soul. Recently, there was a video that went around that I shared. Actually, I shared it twice because it was so good, by a guy named Alistair Begg. And he is one of my favorite preachers, probably because of his accent. But he's so good, so solid. And it's this little excerpt in one of his sermons where he was talking about the thief on the cross, and how what it must have been like for the thief on the cross to get to heaven that day. And everybody at heaven, obviously this is not necessarily exactly how it's going to go, but for the purpose of illustration, everybody in heaven's like, well, how'd you get here? Do you understand the doctrine of justification by faith alone? And the thief on the cross is kind of like, no, I don't understand any of that. All I know is that the man on the middle cross said that I can come. And I tell you that, not necessarily because it directly relates to what we're talking about, but I tell you that because that was one of the most refreshing 2 minutes of the last month for me, because it just took me back to the gospel. It took me back to Jesus. And in the midst of all the noise of current cultural issues and being a pastor and being a husband and being a father, I just needed a moment to be reminded of the goodness and the sweetness of the message of Jesus. And then as I got ready to do this podcast, my mind went back to where it often retreats to. I started this podcast by asking the question, where do you retreat to when life is busy? Maybe it is, you like your ice cream or your TV shows or your movies, you want to veg out, whatever it is. Spiritually speaking, for me, that place is Psalm 23. If you know me, you've probably heard me talk about this psalm before. I preached several sermons on it because I know that it is the psalm that most people know, and it's become maybe cliche. People hang it on their walls. But this is the psalm that my soul just keeps going back to, because this is where I find so much richness and spiritual food for myself, for my soul. And it goes very simply, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." When I read from the Legacy Standard Bible, it says, "Yahweh is my shepherd, I shall not want." And I'm reminded that in the name Yahweh is the self-sufficiency of God, that He is who He is, that He needs nothing, that He's not served by human hands, that we cannot add to Him, that He is God, there is no other, that He is the Creator, He is the all-powerful, all-knowing, all-present one, needing of nothing, and yet He's my shepherd. And because He's my shepherd, I shall not want. Other translations say, I have everything I need. Let that sink in for a minute. Because how many times do we run to other shepherds? And they're false shepherds, but we run to them. How often do we go to our coping mechanisms? How often do we chase after all these other things that we think are going to give rest to our souls, that we think are going to give us what we need to get through the day? And yet, God says he is our shepherd. And we have everything we need when we have him, because he makes us to lie down in green pastures. He leads us beside quiet waters. In the chaos of life and in the chaos of politics and the church world and the chaos of your school or your job or wherever it is, in the chaos of all that, he is the one who makes us to lie down in green pastures and leads us beside quiet waters. And it's there that he restores our soul. We may not necessarily always get a good night's sleep, but we can find rest for our weary souls always at the feet of Jesus. He guides us in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. So when we come to him and he leads us beside these quiet waters, it's not simply so that we can find rest, but so that we can find the grace that we need to walk in the righteousness that he set before us for his name's sake. Not for ourselves, not for the people around us, but for his name's sake. And even though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we fear no evil because he's with us. It's his rod and his staff that comfort us. It's his rod that drives away our enemies, that reminds us that he is our protector. He is the sustainer of our souls. It is his staff that reminds us that he's the one who leads us and he guides us along these paths. They comfort us because we remember that he is in control and we are not. That he is our shepherd and we are simply his sheep following him. He prepares a table before us in the presence of our enemies, anoints our head with oil, our cup overflows. This table in the presence of our enemies for David often actually meant enemies of war, men who were seeking his life. For us, it may be the enemies of the unbelievers who are antagonizing us for our beliefs. Maybe it's simply the enemies of our own fear and our own guilt that we impose upon ourselves. Maybe it's the enemy of anxiety and worry. In the presence of all of that, with all of the distractions and all of the things that we could give our attention and our fear towards, he prepares a table for us. He provides for us, and he sits at that table with us, and we dine with him. As he provides for us, as he sits with us, our cup overflows. We don't just have what we need, we have an abundance. His mercies are new every day, and they are overflowing every day, meaning we have more than what we need for the day. Surely goodness and loving kindness will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of Yahweh forever. We're secure in his hands. Our world crumbles around us. Governments rise and fall. Leaders and organizations rise and fall. Leaders in our churches, sadly, rise and fall. But he's always on the throne, and he will never leave. And it's his goodness and mercy that follow us. And we dwell in his house, in his kingdom forever. Nothing will change that. He holds us in his hand, and no one can snatch us out of the Father's hand. Jesus holds us in his hand, and no one can snatch us out of the Son's hand. And the Spirit seals us, and no one can break the seal of the Spirit on our hearts. We are secure in him forever. And I don't know about you, but that is the reminder that my soul often needs. It is, I probably haven't said a single thing that you don't already know. And maybe you've rolled your eyes at this because you're like, man, I know all of this. I mean, it's Psalm 23. I've heard 100 sermons on this. I get it. I know. But do you? I mean, can you honestly say today that you are living with the reality and the understanding that it is God who is your shepherd, that you're not chasing after other shepherds, you're not being led astray by false ideologies, you're not being led astray by your own sins and passions? Can you honestly say that you are sitting at the table of the Lord today, feasting with him, dining with him, and not trying to get your satisfaction from the things of this world and what it has to offer? Can you honestly say that your goal today is to walk in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake, or are you just simply trying to get through the day without making too many mistakes? Can you honestly say that you are striving to live this life by following your shepherd, by living with the grace and the mercy that he provides, toiling with all of his energy that he provides for you? Or are you trying to run on an empty cup? Are you trying to muster up the strength from within yourself to be a good enough Christian, to be a good enough spouse, a good enough parent, a good enough employee, a good enough boss? Or are you operating with the strength and the grace that he provides? I don't know where you may be at right now in all of this. Maybe you have been in a season of truly resting in the Lord and being in his presence and spending time in his word and all these things, and maybe things are going really well. Let this be an encouragement and a message to you to keep going, to continue to follow after your shepherd. But my guess is that if most of you are like me, we're constantly living in days where we are pulled in every which direction besides the direction of Christ. And we need to be reminded, our souls need to be reminded of the richness of his grace, of the all-satisfying salvation and grace of Jesus Christ that he alone provides. That we need to be reminded that our souls have many directions that they want to go after. There are many false shepherds in this world, but there is only one true shepherd that we need to keep our eyes fixed on, because otherwise we will sink in the trials of this life. Otherwise we will fade away. Our faith will grow cold. Our love will grow hard. And we need to be reminded of the goodness of Jesus and his gospel. He is strong and he is kind. And he loves us with a love that will not go away. It will not quit. He pursues after us. Maybe you need to be reminded of that today. I often need to be reminded of that. And I pray that this is something that has brought encouragement to you, not because of anything that I've said, but because of simply the words of Psalm 23. Read them over and over again. I know you know them. Recite them to yourself and pray them to the Lord. Spend some time really, really digging deep into these truths. And my final encouragement is simply, if you are like me and you've gotten caught up in the endless scrolling of Facebook and news feeds and social media and the endless conversations about what's going on in culture, that has its place. I'm not saying we need to detach ourselves from all of that. But if you've gotten caught up in that or you felt exhausted from that, spend some time running to your shepherd today. Spend some time forsaking those things, at least for a moment, and spending time in the Word. Spending time in the Word of life, where there is a fountain of mercy. There is a fountain of strength and grace available to us as the children of God. So thanks for spending a few minutes and listening to this. If this is an encouragement to you, send this on to somebody else. I mean, this is one of those podcast episodes that I hope is just easily shared. I've got a few friends in my life who, when they come across something that ministers to them, they send it to me, and I love that. I'm thankful for that, and I pray that this episode of this podcast can be that for you, that you can send that to somebody who maybe needs it. And I would say that to some degree we all need it, right? No matter how well we may think we're doing. So this has been another episode of the Hold Fast podcast. I want to remind you that I would love to talk about things that maybe you would want me to talk about on the podcast. So if you've got a question you want me to address or a topic you want me to dive into, send that to me. And if it's something that takes more than 15 minutes, I'm willing to take a little bit more than 15 minutes to dive into something if it's important. So don't let the time constraint maybe scare you away from suggesting something. But if this is an encouragement, share it with somebody. Give us a rating or a review wherever you listen to podcasts, and that will help other people see it as well. But until next time, this has been Hold Fast. Thanks for listening. God bless.